Welcome to the Marketing Signals Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Bahr, CEO of Faring. Today, we're diving into the world of brand tracking and post-purchase surveys. Joining me is Samir Balwani, CEO of QRY. Samir and his team have been at the forefront of joining brand tracking and post-purchase survey data to get a clearer picture of marketing performance. Welcome to the podcast, Samir.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
As you know, I'm very excited to dive into this topic. But I think before we start here, we'd just love to hear a quick overview of your background and a little bit about QRY.
Yeah, so I've been in marketing for about 20 years now, running from the agency side, working on brands like LVMH. I was at StyleCaster, which was a fashion and style magazine, online publisher, and then most recently helping build brand strategy at American Express before starting QRY. QRY is a media buying agency. We position ourselves as a full funnel media buying agency, actually helping brands understand the impact of their brand campaigns and truly driving performance marketing at the same time. So I'm a brand guy. I love brand stuff, but I'm also a data and analytics nerd, as you already know, which has made me lean to performance as well. So really finding the marriage between the two has been key, and I think is really important for brands to truly understand how to scale properly.
Awesome. Yeah. So jumping into it, again, brand tracking, it's the topic of this episode. We could just start with maybe a brief overview of just the brand tracking space. I think a lot of Faring's current customers, these D2C brands, don't have a ton of experience in brand tracking. It's almost like this foreign world that's outside of measurement, I think a lot of people would think. Curious to just hear your overview.
Yeah, so brand tracking, brand health tracking is really understanding the space that the brand takes in the consumer's mind. So it answers things like how many consumers know about me, what are the attributes that they consider. It helps you answer things like, what's my market penetration? What's my category penetration? Things like that. We generally see brands go through a few paths to get this data. Sometimes it's surveying their own customers to just understand what they think about them in that moment. Sometimes it's truly going out and having a agency do like a big quarterly or annual brand tracker. And then there's new tools that are popping up like Tracksuit, which allow you to do that on a month-to-month basis with a digital panel. Each has their pros and cons, and each has a place in their process. But the goal of it is to really understand, what's my brand awareness? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? And what do people think about my brand?
Yeah, makes sense. And when should brands think about measuring their brand awareness? Like, is it a revenue number? Is it hey, we went omni-channel, now we need to start thinking about this?
Yeah.
At what point? Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I would tell you that you should always be surveying your customer base, whether it's quarterly, annually, however you want to do it. You don't need to do the whole customer base, but at least a portion of it, to just truly understand what are the brand attributes. What do people think about you? You can do that through Klaviyo. You can do that through a post-purchase survey. We do a lot of post-purchase survey around why did you purchase from us? Who's the competitive set? Those really help us understand what the market looks like. As you scale, as you grow, you'll end up having to do either one of these monthly panels or a big, brand health tracker. The reason why you end up having to do these is at some point you will hit a point in your category where you can only scale by taking market share. And at that point, you really want to understand where you are in terms of, before I even get into the consideration set, do people know about me and what do they think about me? And that's the stage I wish. So if you ask me, is it a revenue standpoint? No, because it depends on your market size. It's really one of the first levers I like to pull when people say my performance marketing has plateaued and I don't understand why we can't scale. Usually what we end up seeing is their brand awareness has been shrinking month over month. And that's been the thing holding them back. They're not even getting into the consideration stage, and we're just going after the same audience set over and over again.
Got it. Makes sense. That was going to be my next question. It's like, what is the trigger from the marketer or the brand that sparks this idea. And it sounds like performance is starting to plateau. The same strategy or tactics that the brand was using are now less effective today than they were yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, now you need to start thinking in a more macro sense.
If you want a singular point that will make you say, all right, I really got to take a look at this brand health tracking stuff, it's if your brand search volume, not spend, because like that fluctuates with competition. If your brand search volume starts to decrease, that is a great indicator of I need to actually start tracking my brand awareness. And I may not have a performance or product issue. I may have an awareness issue. Because that is a great way of saying, okay, great. People are searching for us less. Our brand is less aware. Because think about it, brands go through the cycle, right? They launch a big product, they get this nice little spike, and then it degrades over time. And unless they do something else to spike it back up, it'll just continue to degrade. So you want to track that and see that it's compounding over time and not just either spiking and, degrading to below your previous point versus kind of staying steady.
It sounds like even a small brand could use Google's Search Console to just track that over time. It seems like it's a pretty good proxy for overall brand awareness, is making sure that brand search terms are going up over time.
Yeah. I mean, the hard part about Search Console, we do it in a unique way. So Search Console is a great way to do it, but it can be pretty messy because it's indexed. Organic search volume is another great way to do it because you can kind of see, that. But again, that's also messy. What we actually do is we take our Google search campaigns, because we're running brand broad. I think most people will run some kind of brand campaign where it's broad. We'll take our impression share and inverse it to get the full picture. So that way we can say, okay, if we had 30% impression share against our brand campaign, we can assume 100% impression share equals X impressions. And we can actually plot that out over, a month-to-month basis.
You mentioned this before, but from a brand tracking, whether you're doing it via surveys monthly or whatnot, I know we've spoken about Tracksuit before, and you guys use Tracksuit. Yeah, what are the options? If you're a brand and you're starting to get into this, maybe what are like the ladders? Like the first ladder being you can use any survey tool to send out a monthly or quarterly email. And then, where does it ladder up to maybe when you're using a tool like Tracksuit and then you have essentially a monthly index that you're looking at to understand this in an ongoing basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think start with your, Klaviyo emails, have fairing as a post-purchase survey to just answer kind of these questions. Once the gap with that, though, is you're only getting responses from people that have purchased from you. You are not getting answers from people who have not purchased from you. And so once you've tapped out that audience set and you feel like you've reached what you need to know from the people that are your customers, that is generally when we will tell people, okay, now it's time for a panel survey where you are going out to prospects who have not purchased from you yet or are purchasing from your competitive set. That's where a Tracksuit or a brand health tracking, there are agencies that will do this. Tracksuit is great, though, because it gives us baseline awareness and attributes. Depending on the size of your business, you may say, all right, I want a lot more. Like, I want to understand the attitudinal reasoning, who these people are, truly do like audience listening and persona building. That's where these like broader brand health trackers can be helpful. So it is truly a question around depth versus frequency. And so I will say that they don't preclude each other. Like no different than how we look at it on the performance side. You and I were just talking about this. Like you're going to look at last click, you're going to look at your MTA model, you're going to look at your incrementality and MMM. Brand health tracking is the same way. You should be looking at your customer surveys, your post-purchase survey, your Tracksuit for monthly frequency, and then a deeper audience review annually.
Yeah. What are the top 3 questions or 2 or 3 questions that you would ask current customers when you're trying to measure kind of brand awareness, brand health, and then maybe what are the 2 or 3, and how do they differ from when you're asking kind of the non-customer segment?
Yeah. So existing customers, I love asking, who are you purchasing for? Because I want to understand, is this for themselves or for somebody else in their life? I also like to understand from our purchasers, who is the competitive set? Like, who else did you think about before you purchased from us? And then the third one, if I really do like, what are you using this for?
Got it.
People automatically assume that people are using the product for what they think they're going to use it for. But we have found audiences for marketing that were like nascent by asking that question, right? You always get surprised by what people are using it for. So that's existing customers. That's like our post-purchase survey and VIP email survey. In the panels, I like to ask, there's a handful of questions that are like pretty standard. One of them is what do you think about value for the money? Is the brand innovative? And then you can ask, a brand specific question. Sometimes it's like comfort and feel or style, and is a brand for people like me, right? Those are generally the attributes. The panel surveys are really valuable to us because it helps us peel back and give feedback to product design teams when we say, okay, great. A brand is being seen as low value for the money and low product innovation. Well, great. We need to either message those things in our brand awareness campaigns, but we also need the reasons to believe before we can even message it. Because if there aren't new products coming out, or we aren't able to actually deliver and explain why this is value for the money, we're going to just look like we'll look like salesmen, right? And it's more about the messaging then. So we find the value is communicating marketing's challenges back to the internal teams, especially on the product side.
It's interesting because brand awareness, or just to use the word brand, like if you're looking at who, like your brand is who is using your product. It is your like part of your competitive set. Like all of these factors go into what positions your brand in a specific way. And at least my perception when I think of brand awareness, I just immediately think of like, have you heard of this brand or not? And just offering that. But it definitely, as you're alluding to, goes much deeper and could actually be, we always joke at Fairing where it's like these one-off surveys are, they just go into a PDF, let's say, and they're circulated quarterly. I mean, hopefully someone's acting on them, but it's interesting because some of these other things could be, like you could be looking at your competitive set if you have an ongoing survey to VIPs every day, if that's changing. Hey, is there a new entry into the market? Like, how are we positioned against them? So it's definitely could be an always on tactic. And it seems like that's what the Tracksuits of the world are trying to do, is like, how do we kind of make this something that isn't put into the research corner and put more into the performance marketing corner, which obviously has much larger budgets.
Yeah. I mean, I think the key piece of this though is you need a person, whether that's on the brand side or on the agency side, to actually be looking at these insights and say, hey, here's the value of it. Here are the things that we're going to be impacting on it. We review the Fairing data for our clients into our monthly reports. We review the Tracksuit data into our monthly reports because it really helps us impact and make recommendations of, do we need to be investing in these product sets versus these product sets? Do we need to pull money to, run an awareness campaign? Should we be making a case for an awareness campaign? Because if we start to see awareness dip, or even in our post-purchase surveys, some of the attributes start to dip, that's a bellwether for us for 3 months out. It won't impact us this week or next week or even the month after, but it does give us the opportunity to manage against, the summer, and really valuable ahead of Black Friday, Cyber Monday when we're planning that stuff, because we really do want to see brand awareness lifting before coming into major sale periods, because that's it. Black Friday is a perfect example of this. 50% off of something that is valued at $0 to somebody is still $0. Yeah. So unless people want you, your sale doesn't really matter. And that's where these brand health trackers are really helpful for.
From a brand awareness perspective down to like the outcome of, let's say, revenue? Like, are there big correlations? You alluded to it just now, as far as like you're almost 3 months behind when you're doing these things, or you just need to be thinking about 3 months in the future. Are there any patterns that often stick out beyond that? Like, does the brand awareness survey pretty much correlate with revenue, would you say, or it's a little bit noisy there?
So it's pretty noisy because we only get 12 data points a year, right?
Yeah.
Like, I would love to have a daily tracker, but that's just not realistic.
Yeah.
It is. So there's a Harvard Business Review article about this, and I'll try and find it so we can put it in the show notes. But where they did correlate brand awareness and brand health along with revenue. Obviously, they did it amongst bigger brands, so it's like an airline and so on and so forth. But that's because they have those daily data sets. So if you take that as your proxy, then the answer is yes. I mean, for me, the brand health tracker and the brand search volume, if you increase my branded search volume, my performance marketing is going to automatically go up, right? And so I already know that to be true. I think, to your point, though, how we communicate that back to the finance teams and our partners is a little bit more difficult to be said. But it does, I think, in the last 2 years, marketing went from being very straightforward and very clear to us realizing that we actually don't really understand what's going on. And it's more about how do you build multiple data points so that way you can triangulate the impact of the business and diagnose, right? I like to think about it as if we're a doctor, and the doctor will look at you and go, okay, well, you got this symptom and this symptom and this symptom, and so I think it's this, and let's test that, and if that doesn't work, then I think it's this. And that's how marketers need to think. And brand health tracking, post-purchase survey, MMM, incrementality test, those are all tool sets in that diagnostic process.
Yeah, makes sense. You mentioned finance a second ago. Brand health trackers, easier sell to finance or a performance marketer?
Oh, neither. The brand marketer is all for it because he or she is just looking for anything to put in front of the finance team that is a number, right? Like anything like that. I think, so I will say the best teams that I have heard be successful with this, and the best teams that we've worked with where they are very successful with it, is where the head of ecom or performance marketing, whomever owns it, because sometimes it isn't on the ecom team, sometimes there is like a media team that's dedicated to it, and the head of brand, when they work together and use this as a way to actually bridge that conversation, that's when we've seen the most success. That's when we've seen CFOs get on board with it, because it is just a resource allocation question, right? Because look, if I see brand awareness is decreasing, but is seen as innovative has decreased at a higher rate, I will say, don't give media money, invest that money in product development. Because if you give me that money, I don't have anything to say. And I may increase brand awareness, but the attributes that matter will still not increase. And so, give me something to talk about, and then we'll talk about it. So the CFO has this really unique role where they do need to look at resource allocation across the whole business versus just marketing. And so sometimes the best investments are not marketing, it's product development and R&D.
You might have mentioned this before we jumped on, but it was this idea of like sales-led versus product-led, or let's call it performance-led versus product-led. And if you're too heavy performance-led, like that, your P&L is going to be in rough shape. You're climbing an uphill battle.
So we will look at a brand, and we have benchmarks, and obviously benchmarks are benchmarks, and so every brand is a little bit different. But when I look at a business and, again, we look at last click every once in a while, and this is one of those times where we'll look at last click or data driven in GA4. If 60% of your revenue is being touched by media, that is a red flag to me. Like that is hey, this is a very commodity problem solution oriented, but there's not a lot of like stickiness here, and people aren't really talking about it in a meaningful way. And again, I'm talking about business at scale. If you are just starting out and 60% of your revenue is coming from media, that makes sense. But like at a point, you need this to level out, and you need your other channels to be doing that. And that only happens if your brand is worth talking about, your products are worth talking about, and people want to talk about it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we have a partnership going live shortly that really jumps into word of mouth, which we're super excited about. And that's like, to me, that's like something that brands should always be measuring, is like, what is my word of mouth? Is it going up, or like, what kind of business do I have? Like, obviously certain verticals have different levels of word of mouth. But if it's extremely low, then either you're in a bad vertical for word of mouth, like maybe underwear or something that's a little bit private, or hey, your customers aren't super excited to talk about you with their friends. So yeah, similar vein.
Yeah, I mean, even the brands where are a little bit more private, you would expect a higher LTV then, right?
Yeah.
Like that's another indicator of, do I have a sticky business or not? If you are low word of mouth and low LTV and you have to continually acquire people, your margins better be amazing, right? Like that's the only way that you'll be able to be successful there. So, I mean, I think that these are all, this kind of goes to the world of the new marketer, where they really do have to be a business-minded, like very business-minded. It's not enough to just be creative or be a subject matter expert on Google Ads and Facebook ads anymore. Yeah. You really have to understand how it all plays together for the business.
Next thing I wanted to jump into was really what sparked me being super excited about you having coming on the podcast, was joining brand awareness data with post-purchase kind of attribution survey data. Think about like very top of the funnel compared to very bottom of the funnel. And I know we've spoken to a bunch of these players in the brand awareness side, and we have just the same thing. We're like envious of the data the other one has. Yeah. So I'm curious how you've gone about combining those to maybe where 1 + 1 = 3, and you're able to kind of glean maybe a better understanding of that top of the funnel and then what's actually driving those outcomes.
I mean, for us, it's really just, we love using a partner like Tracksuit and Faring together. That is a huge unlock for us, because then I can monitor brand awareness from Tracksuit at our, non-customer, and then look at Faring to understand, okay, is the competitive set that I put into Tracksuit the actual competitive set my customers are looking at? Are the brand attributes actually that I'm measuring in our brand health tracker the ones that are actually triggering people to purchase, right? So, I've talked about is an innovative brand. Does that matter to our customer base? Do they care that it's innovative, or do they really just care that I have one product and it is a rock star product and that's all they purchase, and they just, they look at quality? Okay, great. That helps inform my, both my panels for my brand health tracking, but also my messaging and brand awareness campaigns, because then it's, okay, I've learned what my customers care about when they purchase from us. We're tracking that at Tracksuit, through Tracksuit at the brand awareness level. And then we're running media about that. So I should see our panel increase and our increase in customers at the bottom. And it should be that stepped process that leads to brand growth.
Yeah. So are you asking in those brand awareness surveys anything channel specific?
In our brand awareness surveys, we will ask, we don't ask channel specific, but we do ask for media consumption. So where are you? And that's usually at the category. Okay. Yeah, at the category level. So that helps us understand, okay, TV is an important channel for us, right? Yep. Because that's where that's where this category says that they spend their time. Or, right now it's mostly streaming. A lot of streaming is like popping up. So, CTV is important for us, and that's a channel that we need to invest in. But to the whole system, the hard part, the challenge that we run into is no one says, I love AppLovin, because they don't even know that exists as a tool. So it is still the media agency's job to kind of tease back the data and understand, what does this mean? What are the channels that we see? What are the channels that we don't see? Because the gap with Tracksuit and post purchases, it's still user feedback. And so if the channel doesn't have a perfect channel that we actually run into this a lot with is Reddit. people consume Reddit and don't even realize that it just is such it's such a normalcy that they don't really think about, oh, I heard about this on Reddit, or I researched it on Reddit. And so we don't see Reddit pop very often, even though we know it's a really important channel for a lot of our brands. And so that is where we want to look at the full picture and feel very confident in 80%. You and I were talking about this ahead of time, because I think media is all about risk reduction. It's, you are going to invest in advertising and you are going to assume a certain return. And it's all about reducing that risk on that return not being there. And so if we can reduce the risk on 80% of our investment, it allows us to feel a lot more confident in the 20% that we are unsure about. The AppLovins, the Reddits, the big TV ads, the billboards, things like that.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, we're running some studies now to try to suss out how consumers are identify channels, to your point.
Yeah.
And a good example is like AppLovin. When they first started running ads, we actually were advising our customers not to add it in their survey and just let people write it into other. That'll give you like a pretty strong signal if it's driving, like someone's taking the effort to put something in. And it also gives us the language in which they are writing the channel to help us then add it as a pre-existing solution. So they're pre-existing response. And we're doing that with Reddit as well. It's like, to your point, it's funny you mentioned Reddit. We were just talking to a brand yesterday about that. I think Reddit has an oversized impact that is just very hard to measure.
Yeah.
And we were adding a follow-up to their question, like where on Reddit, and definitely leaving that other response there as well, just because like how do consumers think about, like, is there almost like a power user where it's like, I was on the XYZ subreddit, and then the other person's like, I was actually searching Google and it brought me to Reddit, and that's where I learned this. So, yeah, we're constantly making revisions and changing recommendations when it comes to the attribution. How did you hear about us surveys? And that's definitely, I think this summer we'll probably make a broader recommendation where Google and search engine will go away and it'll be replaced with just general web browsing that allows us to get better insights in the bottom of the funnel.
I mean, it is really interesting because the other piece of it too, that I do think, the question that we always get is, well, can we trust people's responses? Yeah. And my answer is always 90% you can, because whether they say Reddit or not, whatever channel that they remembered last was the most impactful at the end of the day, right? Like that is the one. And so it is truly sussing out we recognize the customer journey is messy. There's a lot of touch points. Not all touch points are made equal though. And so really understanding, okay, this was a high impact versus low impact. And like, that is where, ultimately marketing is a person thing. And so if the billboard on Times Square is what everyone looked at and remembered your brand by, then that is what they were. Even if you run the best Google brand search, the billboard in Times Square is what led them to get to you. So like, it is really understanding what people say is important.
Yeah. We just revised our mission at Fairing to be all about decoding customer minds. It's like, what is up in the mind and how do we get that out and make it almost analogous to like a pixel firing? So
yeah, that's awesome.
How often do you see a brand awareness, the results of a brand awareness survey kind of contradicting the post-purchase survey results? And is there scenarios where, and maybe you see, you might have alluded to this before, where it's like maybe it's just an unhealthy P&L where the post-purchase survey results look great, but the brand awareness is low, and that's just because it's driven by performance. Like, or is there ever a scenario where maybe it's a very healthy P&L and a brand might not need as much brand awareness?
So I don't think brand awareness is for everyone. So I will say that if you are a true problem solution product, like if you truly in a non-competitive market, which is a very unique product set, and whoever you are, blue ocean, great work, go for it. But brand is a moat for most people, right? Brand denotes trust. Brand is an easier way to deliver on, word of mouth. Google is a problem solution product, and yet it will still, Google is the brand and they still do a lot of brand marketing. And so I think that there is it is very rare that brand is not important for our product. When it differentiates between when we end up getting situations where post-purchase survey and brand health trackers don't match, it does happen from time to time. We usually need to revisit our brand health tracker. It generally means that we made a mistake in the assumption of how the questions we need to ask. It is very rare that we see, we haven't done this yet, but let's say we asked, is value for its money or is innovative or high quality in our brand health tracker, and then we asked, is innovative or high quality in our post-purchase survey. And if they've mismatched, one, it's probably because the audience sets are different, right? Yeah. One is a customer, one has made the purchase decision, so they have already identified that it is innovative and high quality. Usually that would happen in a brand that has small market penetration, right? Because if we are paneling, let's say you've got 2% category penetration and we're paneling 98% of your brand, 98% of the people don't think you're innovative. Well, you found the 2% that did, and that is that, right? So I think that is where we generally see kind of a mismatch. It is rarer than you would imagine.
Well, we'll wrap up with one concluding question is, what's one measurement myth you wish every marketer would stop believing?
One measurement myth that I wish marketers would stop is that you will know exactly one-to-one what works and what doesn't work. I think the thing that people forget, the one variable people forget when they run tests is time. What worked yesterday will probably not work tomorrow and may not work the day after, but it could work again 3 weeks later. And it's because there are so many variables in the world that we live in. And so trying to figure out one-to-one, this worked and I'm going to double down on it and it's going to continue to work, is such a myth. Marketing is really meant to guide your business more like a boat, where you are trying to make shifts along a current that you are being driven along, and you're just hoping you're making the right shifts and you're never spinning the wheel too fast. That's, I think, the most important piece.
Yeah, awesome. It seems like we're slowly getting closer to that day by day, but it is taking some time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for jumping on the podcast. If you have any closing remarks, or where can people find you?
Check us out. You can Google QRY. We'll come up. Otherwise, find me on LinkedIn. I am posting regularly. I run a podcast called Chief Advertiser as well. You should come and listen in. But otherwise, say hi. I love chatting about this stuff, and we'll always meet with anyone.
Awesome. Cool. That wraps it up.
Thanks for having me, Matt. This was so much fun.